Buenas tardes a todos. Good evening. This is Abelardo de la Peña Jr. Let me start again. Good afternoon, everybody. Good evening. This is Abelardo de la Peña Jr., Director of Marketing and Communications with La Plaza de Cultura y Artes, welcoming you to En Casa con La Plaza. As you know, this is La Plaza de Cultura y Artes, our way of bringing these conversations, presentations, performances, and more to you, from our home to yours in these pandemic times. Once a month, we turn this over to the Mexican-American Cultural Education Foundation, our good friends and partners. And today is the day, this month in October, where we celebrate the final days of Latino Heritage Month. And I'll be introducing you now to Dr. Jose Luis Ruiz. But before I do that, if you're on Facebook, as I'm trying to do here with this phone, please share with your friends, start a watch party. If you're on Zoom, chat. We have our chat feature, we have our Q&A. Shoot up some questions. Let us know where you are viewing from. We appreciate knowing where you're viewing from and enjoying this. So without further ado, let me introduce you to the president and founder of the Mexican-American Cultural Educational Foundation, Dr. Jose Luis Ruiz. Take it away.
Abelardo, thank you so much. What a pleasure, friends. What a pleasure to be able to spend this next few minutes, an hour with you. And thank you, La Plaza, for being such a great host. And we, as some of you who have been here before are aware, the Mexican-American Cultural Education Foundation's mission is to change the distorted and really intentionally incorrect narrative that's being told about the Mexican-American people and about the Mexican-American community. And we do that by having all these many amazingly successful Mexican-Americans who have changed the landscape of California and of the United States. And of course, we couldn't be any happier to have Don Guerrero tonight with us. He is, somebody has done a tremendous job representing us, representing Mexican Americans, Chicanos, Latinos, and the gay community. And that's very powerful. And so many of our Mexican American people have done that. And we continue to be put in this position to believe that our community has not contributed, that our community is just taking away and not contributing to this country. Or, just yesterday, we had a board meeting with our advisory board of the Mexican American Cultural Education Foundation, in which we were talking about the importance of keeping the education going in regards to our community, because our community, the Mexican American community, continues to be maligned, continues to be attacked by unscrupulous people, and certainly, we came out with the decision to continue to focus on the Mexican American issues, because it is a very important issue. And then this morning I wake up and one of our board members sent me this Instagram post. A young actress, Mexican American actress, being harassed in the street because she's Mexican and she's speaking Spanish, and and doesn't that make you upset? Doesn't that make you realize that we Mexican Americans really have a long history of having to deal with a lot of unnecessary abuse, And one thing that we talked about on our board meeting yesterday is that we need to be, and we are going to be unapologetically focusing on the Mexican American issues, and remind our community who the Mexican American people really are. And the reason why is because often we don't know. Our young men and women don't really know who we really are, because we've been allowed the the unscrupulous people like Trump and so many people out there to say things about us for 180 years, and it allows us to really actually believe that. But who are we? Well, let me remind you that unlike all the silly people that sometimes, puts us down, the Mexican American people come from a culture that is over 2,000 years old, the center of the culture of this continent. In the area of Mexico, the greatest civilizations of the continent developed: the Aztecs, the Mayans, the Toltecs, civilizations that were as advanced as European civilizations. And I hope you, young people, because I know thousands of people will see this video, I hope you young people start realizing that our civilization was as advanced and as beautiful as European civilizations at the time. And yes, people have put it down and make it appear like there were savages. There were not. There were poets, there were architects, there were amazing writers and physicians and economists at the same level as Europeans. And when the Europeans arrived to America, they saw Mexico and they realized how it was the center of the culture, and they made Mexico City, the capital of the most important viceroyalty of the continent. And for many, many years, Mexico was, hundreds of years, was the wealthiest part of the continent. If you ever go to Mexico City, you will be amazed to see that it is really a royal city. It was built to be a royal city. No other place in this continent, there are the structures that you will see in Mexico City, the places where kings ruled. It is a spectacular city. Let's not forget that. Let's not forget that our cousins in Mexico are not it's not a drug-infested nation. It is the 12th largest economy of the world, my friends. It's a third economic partner of the US. So Mexicans are not poor. Mexicans are not just asking for or begging for things. Mexico is the powerhouse of Latin America. The economy of Mexico is as large as almost the rest of Latin America combined. So let's be proud. Let's be proud of who we are. And let's not allow people to put us down. Let's change the paradigm, friends. Let's change, let's look down on people that make, that make stories and movies that makes Mexican Americans look like we are just some uneducated group of people. Yeah, of course, Mexicans have built California and Texas and Arizona to be a great place. And then, of course, the history tells us. And this little section that I wanted to share with you is just a reminder that the Mexican culture built California. Mexicans invented the cowboy culture. It's not an American thing. It's a Mexican thing, And of course, when America conquered Mexico, the California and Texas and Arizona, they developed, this effort to minimize the value of people and actually basically enslave in Mexico our ancestors. And I tell you, although I was born in Mexico City, I can tell you that I have relatives that go as far back as people that live back and forth in Mexico and the United States. And some of our ancestors were removed of their values, and then they were made into servants. And we can't forget that. And just recently, the news was talking about how the slaves, the relatives of slaves may be getting some government repairment, some government effort to give them something back for their generations of abuse. How about the Mexicans who had their possessions removed from them and then turned into servants? We can't forget that. Our history has been very, very dark. You know, the way that Mexican Americans are abused, not Latinos, by the way, not other Latinos, Mexicans have been the center of the abuse because we have this land. This land used to be Mexico, and there has been an effort to downplay our value. So with that said, friends, I want to remind you that there's a reason why our community has been abused for so long, and we have had to put up with it. No, nevertheless, because we're hardworking people and we're brilliant people and we're capable of overcoming all of this. You know, we have such an amazing history, such an amazing people that have made us so proud. And tonight, we have a person that has made us very, very proud. And not only that, we actually have almost two for the price of one, because tonight we are celebrating a Mexican-American history maker, Dan Guerrero, but his father is also a Mexican-American history maker, and we want to honor him as well. Tonight, we're honoring two Guerreros. We are honoring two people who have changed the landscape of America with their hard effort, with a tremendous contribution to this country. So, Dan, I am honored. I am really honored. We are honored. We are so thankful. We know that thousands of people will view these videos because that's what has happened in the past. We know that La Plaza and we already have this people that come and look at the videos, and we, you know, all our previous history makers. We have had so many amazing people in the past. We're honored to have people like Luis Valdez and Alex Nogales and Gloria Molina. And tonight we are honored to have you, Dan. So my friend, welcome. Welcome, because you're a Mexican-American history maker. Thank you for being with us tonight.
No, thank you so much. I've seen a lot of history. I had no idea I was making some along the way. But I love those photos you just showed of Mexico City. I so love Mexico City. When I was 11 years old, we flew to Mexico City. Mom, Dad, and my little brother, an infant. We're talking 1951. We flew to Mexico City. Imagine DF in 1951. It was so magnificent. And my mom and dad wanted my brother and me, he was still an infant, but to really know Mexico. So we did that first trip, but then we went back in 57 and 58 driving. And we drove all the way down the coast and came back up through the central. They wanted us to know as much of Mexico as we could and know the country, and because they were both so proud of Mexico, you know. So I have a great love for Mexico. I've been back, of course, a million times since, but I love Mexico City.
That is so wonderful to hear, you know, the pride that they wanted to build in you. And I know I can tell you that I've done that with my children. I have tried to share with them, you know, so they understand that whatever they hear in the news and the unfortunately still on the TV is so distorted from the reality. Now, my friend, I know that you are a third generation Mexican American, and it really depends on how you call it, right? Maybe second generation, because your parents were born in America, and then you were born in America. So that's, you know, I know, you're right, maybe second. Some people might call it third, right?
No, mijo, not unless you've had a little tequila. My dad.
Maybe that's what's happening. Maybe that is what's happening. Tell us, that is really a very important story, because I understand you grew up in a part of the country which even today is a place where there's been a tremendous amount of abuse against Mexican Americans, which is Arizona. So tell us a little bit about growing up and the stories that maybe your parents tell you about those, you know, growing up in America, in Arizona, and probably, a few decades ago?
It started with my dad's parents. Eduardo Concepcion Guerrero Aguilar was her maiden name. She was from Sonora, and my grandfather was from La Paz. They came to Tucson in I'm guessing around during the Mexican Revolution. Pero they were brought here by the Southern Pacific Railroad, because they were looking for skilled laborers to help build this country. So not only Mexican Americans, but Mexicans helped build the United States. So he came here and worked for the Southern Pacific Railroad in Tucson his entire life till he retired. And all the kids were born there, including my dad, who was born in Tucson in 1916. Now, my mother's father was actually first generation Irish American.
Oh.
He was born in San Antonio, but he was a mining engineer, and he was working silver mines in Mexico when he fell in love near a silver mine with Fermina Corral. And the Irish family was not at all happy that there was a little Mexican branch added to this Irish tree. But here's the interesting thing. My dad's family was not at all happy when he married my mother, because she was only half Mexican.
Right.
She was Irish. So you had already discrimination among ourselves. Yeah,
that goes back many.
There's my mom and dad.
Look at that beautiful couple right there.
Yeah, he was handsome, and my mother was movie star beautiful. She was beautiful. Her name was Margaret Marmion. But her father died when she was 5, so she was raised by her mother. So she grew up very Mexicana in Tucson. And they met when my mother was 16 and he was 20. They had one date and then they were engaged. And they got married when she was 18, he was 21. I was born when she was 19 and he was 22. They were babies.
They were
babies. Yeah. So actually I was born in Tucson, but I grew up in LA. I left Tucson by the time I left. We moved to LA so my dad could follow his career, But my dad does talk about those days in Tucson they had different experiences, because my mother was muy blanca. My dad was very Indio looking, so, and my mother lived on the other side of town and my dad lived in the barrio part. So like so many, that's where the expression on the wrong side of the tracks. Track went right down the middle of Tucson. The Mexicans were on this side, the non-Mexicans there. But my dad always said, growing up, I thought that they were the minority and we were the majority, because everywhere I saw, there were Mexicans. So he thought they were the majority in Tucson. But,
and my goodness, you have a father, my friend.
Yes.
Lalo Guerrero. It must have been very special to grow with such a talented man, such a man full of stories, and somebody that's really done so much or did so much for our community. And tell us a little bit how it felt to grow the son of such a famous Mexican-American Chicano.
This, by the way, is his first, look, he was 15, 16, he's second from the right. That's Los Carlistas, and they used to play at the Charro Cafe in Tucson back in the 30s. And by the late 30s, he was already coming back and forth to LA. He was recording in the late 30s in Spanish in Los Angeles, late 30s. Wow. And he was singing on Calle Olvera, but his English was perfect, as was his Spanish. So he wanted to be able to sing in English or Spanish, but there was no way.
Why?
Well, he said, Tommy Dorsey was not going to hire a 6-foot brown man. It just wasn't going to happen. And so, a fuerza, he loved his Mexican culture and his music, but he really had no choice. He had to just sing in Spanish. Yeah. So he had a beautiful voice and he could compete talent-wise, but not at that time. Yeah. So
he has been, looking into his history. I got an opportunity to read something that he wrote in one of his interviews. He said he felt that the people that he was trying to perform to, they could not conceive of a Mexican, especially someone that was brown and looked more Indian, sitting out there and singing like Bing Crosby. So he was, in a way, as you just mentioned, kind of forced to just perform to perform to the Mexican American people, although his talent could have, been superior to anyone around. And isn't that upsetting in a way? And of course he did amazing and he overcame all of that, but that must have been upsetting for him that he had this limitation imposed to him.
But you know what? He had this gift. He did not dwell on things. I produced with Nancy de los Santos a documentary on him called Lalo Guerrero, the original Chicano. And I called it that because he's of that first generation born in the US who when they were at home and in their barrio, they thought they were in Mexico. And it wasn't until they went to school they realized they weren't. That first generation that had to balance the two worlds as we balance it today, really. Pero it worked eventually in his favor but in the documentary, I tried to get him to talk about the discrimination in those days and what it was like. And you know what? He was like, well, yeah, but you just went on and you had to, and it's not that he was suppressing it. I think he experienced it and accepted it and then moved on. He just didn't let it. He was the most positive, cheerful man ever. He could have been very bitter. Believe me, he could have, pero no. And in a way he used it. Oh, that's when he got his Alma Award. He could have, I'll tell you, he used it to his advantage because he was in love with boogie and the Pachuco songs, and he wanted to sing boogie woogie and he wanted to sing the blues and he couldn't do any of that in English. So he did it in Spanish. And he started to write all those Pachuco songs back in the 30s or 40s. And then in the 70s, Luis Valdés used them in Zoot. So that's all his music. He did not write them for the play. He wrote them and recorded them back in the real Zoot era. And he brought that kind of music to Spanish. He brought calor to the radio, to the airwaves through his music, So he was an activist using his tool, which was music. The arts and activism are very interconnected. A painter uses his brush. Lalo Alcaraz uses the cartoon strip. Luis used theater to create the Teatro Campesino to get Caesar's message across about the UFW. So the arts and activism have long been comfortable bedfellows, and he uses music.
Yeah, and he definitely he brought a lot of pride to our community and a lot of understanding on who we are, and in a time that was difficult. And you my friend, you had also a difficult upbringing. I mean, you grew up in East LA. You grew up a Chicano, and not just a Chicano, but a Chicano who was gay. And that was a difficult time to be either one of those two, right?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
It was tough to be either, and I was both, And first of all, it was interesting because actually in the early 50s, let's talk about my teen years in East LA, we were Mexicans. We weren't even Mexican Americans yet. We were Mexicans. Even though we were born here, we were Mexicans. Then we became Mexican Americans, then Chicanos, then Latinos, then Hispanics. At one time we were white, and then one day we woke up and we were brown on the census, and so
we just can't figure out who we are.
They don't know who the hell we are. And so all that's going on. And at the same time, I'm a gay boy in the 50s. I wrote a play, as you know, called Gay Tino, and it's about that intersection because don't forget, just as there were no Latino images, really. We had the Cisco Kid on TV, you know, we had a couple things, but hardly, historically, of course, it was full of baloney, and it was nothing compared to what we were doing. We were basically invisible, you know.
Invisible.
And the gay community was also invisible. You know, when I realized I was gay, by the time I was, I don't know, 11, 12 years old, there was no out and proud celebrity on a magazine cover. There was no movies about gays. There was nothing, you know, so you were very isolated in a way, both as a Mexican and as a gay man. And for me in particular, because I wanted to go into, I discovered musical theater early on, and I in love with it. And I knew that in LA, it was very different. I moved to New York City when I was 21, and I lived there for 20 years, all my 20s, all my 30s. I moved back when I was 40. Look at how cute I was. Isn't life vicious? Isn't life mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what
isn't that interesting, my friend? You know, you know, we Mexican Americans, and I'm sure you tell me in previous conversations that we've had that in your case, not looking Mexican was maybe even a disadvantage because people didn't know what you were.
And they would say things about
you were something else. You were too Mediterranean that you mentioned, right?
They didn't know what I was, and very often in school they'd say things to me about, oh, those dirty Mexicans, and I'd have to say I'm Mexican, and they're like, no, you know, it was very difficult. But the interesting thing is that was Los Angeles. When I moved to New York, they didn't know what I was, and then when they realized I was Mexican, it was exotic. I was like Frida Kahlo, for God's sake. It was exotic there, as opposed to being something in Los Angeles. And so it was not an issue. You know, everyone knew I was Mexican. I was the only one in the Broadway community that had a tree with Mexican decorations on it. And my mother would send tamales, you know, special delivery airmail so I could serve them at my Christmas party. So everyone knew, but it didn't define me. I was Mexican, but it didn't define me. And in LA, as in today, I feel, it totally defines you. That's what you are. Never mind. Everything else is secondary. You know, I knew that things were going to be limited for me if I stayed in LA. I'm talking the 60s, 70s. I knew it was going to be limiting, and I felt it would be different in New York, and it was, and I loved it.
Yeah, that's very interesting to understand, and that. The reason why it's limiting and the reason why we continue to fight this situation is because of the terrible opinion and the terrible things that the media and we continue to hear. In other places, even sometimes in Europe, Mexican American or Mexicans are considered something very special.
Oh,
you know?
Yes, yeah.
But not in the Southwest of the United States. And we need to put an end to that. To be honest, we have to put an end to that because the stories told, as we just said earlier today, are completely false. There's not even close to what we really are. And you, of course, you represented us very well. So tell us a little bit about.
Can I interrupt here?
Please.
You mentioned Europe. I produced a night of Chicano and Tex-Mex music in Paris at the Cité de la Musique.
Wow.
And it was Dad and 4 musicians and Flaco Jimenez and 4 musicians. And let me tell you, they tore up the place. And it all happened because of a Chicana from West Covina. Roxanne Frias moved to Paris, I'm sure following romance that always happens. And she went to Paris y se quedó. And she went, the Cité de la Musique is a government-run venue. Beautiful, beautiful place. And she said, they do world music. And she said to them, why don't you do Chicano music? And they said, qu'est-ce que c'est Chicano? What's a Chicano? Just like they do here. Just like a lot of Americans
I love your French.
Oh, but the girls, they're very French. So God bless her. She talked them into it. And the greatest thing, and what the greatest thing was, Jose Luis, we did one night, and it was part of a weekend of American Music Festival. Chicano and Tex-Mex was considered American music.
It is American music.
Which it is. And in Paris, let me tell you, the place was packed and it was fantastic. It was the most fabulous experience, you know. Yeah, they didn't speak Spanish. Some did, I guess, but it was tremendous. Yeah, so Europe has a very different picture of us.
Very different. It's very interesting to see. I personally have experienced that, how even in South America, you know, you go as a Mexican and they see you as a industrial, as somebody that could invest money, and it's a very different perspective. By getting back into the theater in New York City, those were very exciting times for you, right?
Yeah.
You did a lot of things.
Yeah.
Tell us more. Tell us a little bit more about your time in New York City.
Well, I can't tell you the X-rated stuff, and that's really the, look at that. That's not X-rated. That's Bye Bye Birdie, doing Conrad Birdie. I loved it. It was challenging because that was still the era in musicals of the blonde, blue-eyed, all-American boy. See what I'm saying? And I wasn't the villain type. And I was a young leading man, but I didn't look like a young leading American man. So it was a little tricky. Although I did perform and did lots of things for about 8 or 9 years. I performed off-Broadway, lots of nightclub reviews. I performed at the Nixon White House. I performed at the Nixon White House because I was doing an evening of Cole Porter music in a review in Washington. Someone saw it and asked us to perform at the White House. So it was a very exciting time. And then I, quite by accident, started working for a Broadway theatrical agent. And she said, you can still go on auditions, but I need some help. And pretty soon I really loved it. And I became a very successful Broadway talent agent from A Chorus Line to Cats. My first contract was for several of the original cast of A Chorus Line. And my last contract was for Old Deuteronomy in Cats on Broadway. This is my last.
Wow. And
then I moved back to LA in 1982. And you know, one of the things that finally got me to move back?
What?
Zoot Suit on Broadway.
On Broadway?
It was there for 5 minutes. What happened? Yeah, unfortunately. I would come home every Christmas, of course, like all good boys. And I'd see my parents for like one evening because I was with my friends and running around with my LA friends. But one of my closest, well, my brother really in a way, Carlos Almaraz, who was a pretty legendary man himself, a visual artist who died of AIDS in 1989. But there's his artwork is still flawless. There is a documentary on him that just came out on Netflix called Playing with Fire, Carlos Almaraz. And so and he got very involved in the early days of the UFW. And he worked with Luis Valdez and doing posters and banners and very involved. So every time I'd come out, he would talk to me about all those things. And I'd get really interested. And then I go back to New York, back to Broadway, and forget about it. But it interested me poco a poco along the way over the years. And when Zoot Suit came to Broadway, all of a sudden, I'm at Sardi's opening night, which is where everyone went, Sardi's at opening night. But usually it was Gwen Verdon and, you know, Bob Fosse and Ethel Merman. And who's there that night? Eddie Olmos, Cesar Chavez, Lupe Ontiveros, Rose Portillo. I didn't know any of these people, of course. And I'm looking and I'm like, culture shock. I mean, my two worlds just blew up.
Collided.
But there was something about that comfortable, the familia, you know, and that night just stayed with me. And so when I was 40, I looked like I was early 30s. And I thought, you know, maybe I should move back to LA because I said, there's going to be a big Latino market. And in 1982, there were very few Latinos with my background. I wasn't trying to cross over the mainstream. I had been in the mainstream for 20 years.
Right.
I crossed over como tonto to the opposite direction because I move out here There's no Latino market.
Right,
There is
right.
nothing. There's a handful of actors, no Latino producers, writers, director, nada, nada.
But
It took years to start to build.
yeah, but you were a pioneer, and you didn't just do it for you. You did it for all of us. And
Yes, it
I
was.
know you, and we thank you for that. We thank you for maybe it was a sacrifice because you had a successful career in the mainstream and sort of forgotten a little bit about the roots, and we all have, you know. But
Yeah.
then look at that, you've really become an activist. You've been an activist again, not just for the Mexican Americans and Chicano people, but of course for the gay people as well. You know, and it's such an important thing that to remember our roots and to remember that we cannot forget who we are. And look at that. That's you. Tell us about this picture.
This is when SB 170 was in Arizona, and MALDEF sued the state of Arizona. And that's Dolores Huerta, Linda Ronstadt, and a friend of Linda's. And we did a big march in Tucson. There were like 10,000 people marching in Tucson. And of course, Linda was born and raised in Tucson. And for us to be marching against our home state, the home of our birth, was very, very emotional, you know, because we couldn't believe what they were doing to our people, you know.
Yeah.
But the activism came very late, and it came in chapters, because the truth is I came out here, and my New York friends used to call me a born again Hispanic, because I became Mr. Chicano. You know, I started doing events for Carmen Zapata at Bilingual Foundation of the Arts. I was on the board of the Latino Theater Company with Jose Luis Valenzuela and Evelina Fernandez, and I started to want to produce Latino product, and I was just I wrote weekly columns and articles for a trade paper, Dramalog. I interviewed Jimmy Smith when he first arrived here to do LA Law. I produced the Paul Rodriguez show. First time ever Salma Hayek was on US TV. So I was able to make a living and eat, but do something that was important to me. It was something I loved, but I was doing something important. I was, like so many of us, you know, in the arts, we're telling our stories, because if we don't tell our stories, who the hell is going to tell them? You know, we have to. So it wasn't a sacrifice. It was a blessing that I was able to make a living and celebrate my roots and my raza. And then after I wrote Gaytino, then it became the Gay Latino. And then I kind of got into that too.
So tell us something now that we're listening to your, you know, to your activism and how you use your success to promote some important causes. But we understand that you were very successful in New York, you know, and then you've been very successful in California. How, you know, my first question that maybe involves our big audience that will be listening to us. What advice did you give them? Because you obviously been very successful. You've done a lot. How did you achieve such success? What advice do you give our friends?
I can't give advice. You know why? Because everybody has their own journey. You know, everybody does. And there's no one way to do it well. What I did was, you can't do it that way. Everybody has their own path, you know. And mine, I always say, yeah, hang on to your dream. My dream was just to be in show business and performing. But at the same time, I kind of went off to the left for a minute and was an agent. And then I kind of went off to the right and I was producer. But all those things were still within my dream. You know, I was in the business. The arts, I was in the business. And for me, the extra cherry on the Sunday is that I was celebrating Chicano culture getting our stories out there. As recently as 2 years ago, I directed a mariachi opera with a mariachi Vargas, Cruzar la Cara de la Luna. It was beautiful. Pepe Martinez Jr. was our wonderful, wonderful, musical director. We had the Vargas on stage for this beautiful story. There it is, about immigration. It was at the time it was called the Performing Arts Center up in Northridge. It's now the Soraya. It's a beautiful, beautiful venue. And this is about those that travel to El Norte. That's what it's about. As you see, that young lady there is crossing. So to be able to be in the arts and to tell our stories is magic. But there's no advice on how to get there. The thing is, you just got to keep moving. You got to keep moving. And trust me, after you've been around like I have, and people do little bits like this, they think I just sail through having fabulous days, job to job, great, No. There were plenty of dark moments, plenty of times when you were sure you were never going to work again, plenty of times that you were like, what the, it's hard. But what isn't hard? Any business is hard, so you may as well do what you really love. When I left for New York, my parents wanted me to, no, you've got to finish college. I just went to 2 years at East LA College. They wanted me to go to UCLA and to finish, to have something to fall back on. And I said to them, I don't want anything to fall back on. I'm not going to fall back. I had no intention. It never once in the darkest times in New York occurred to me to come back home. I knew I had to be in New York. I needed to be in New York for as long as I was. And then it was time for me to come here. And what I learned in New York, bring it out here. Because in 1982, there was nobody like me in 1982 in LA. Let me tell you that.
Now tell me something. Do you feel that today, and I have to say, I have my opinion on this, but do you feel that today Mexican Americans have much better opportunities than you had in 1980s too?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Do we still have an incredible long way to go? Yeah, but has it grown? Absolutely. And I'll tell you something else. The community, first of all, it's not just Mexican Americans anymore. When I was growing up, if you saw a brown face, that was Mexican American. The Central American all came much later. So now, we're everything here, of course. But it's a very supportive community. And that's what I love, because there was a time, unfortunately, when there was so little, an actor might not mention an audition to somebody else because they really want that job, or, and now it's very familial and everyone is very supportive of one another, whether it's a Puerto Riqueño, a Cubano, a Mexicano, Chicano, whatever, it's very supportive. And there's more opportunity, not because they're opening the doors and opening the windows. No. There's more opportunity because there are things you can do on your own. You don't have to wait for that phone to ring to get an offer to do something. People are making movies with iPhones, for God's sake. They can do webisodes. There's a lot you can do on yourself, and you have to do that. It doesn't mean you're not trying to get those meetings and those pitch meetings at the networks or at the studios, of course. But you can't just sit and be waiting. You better dream up your own. Listen, when I wrote Gaytino, get this, I was 65. I had never written a play. I had not performed on stage in 35 years. Y tonto, hey, I'm going to write a play and everyone is going to come and look at me for 90 minutes. What the hell? But you know what? It wasn't about looking at me. I wanted to tell my dad's story. I wanted to tell Carlos Almaraz his story. I wanted to tell and celebrate Chicano history. I wanted to celebrate the gay experiences I lived at. That's what it's about. It wasn't about me. I'm merely telling you stories of what it was like being Mexican in the 50s, the 60s, whatever, being gay. That's what it was about. It was sharing those stories, those pieces of history. It wasn't about me.
Yeah, tell us more about it. I mean, when are we going to be able to see it again? Are you working on trying to put it up in the theaters again?
No, no. And this, I filmed it. It's a film now. I performed it on stage. The premiere was at the Kirk Douglas Theater, the Center Theater Group with the original producer. And then I performed it all over the country, including at the Kennedy Center,
Wow.
Gay at the Kennedy Center. But I only did a couple of performances a year because I was busy producing, directing, and if I get a call, that's from the movie, that's from the film. So as the years went by and I was getting older, I thought, I can't be running around doing this show forever. I just had my 80th birthday last Wednesday. And,
wow, you look great.
And so all my teeth. And so I wanted to film it because I did not want those stories to get lost when I croaked. I mean, who was going to talk about what Lalo Guerrero was as a father? Who? You know,
yeah.
or what Carlos Almaraz, what he was like as a 12-year-old kid, or at 20 when we moved to New York together as best friends. I didn't want those stories lost, so I did film it. The fall of 2018, we finished everything post y todo in the spring of 2019, and I started to submit to film festivals. And it did 11 film festivals.
Wow.
And the last one was Sedona International Film Festival, and then the pandemic hit.
Oh.
And 5 other festivals I had, like so many, went away.
Right.
Some did virtually, so that ended that. So now I'm going to go back to, because I had music clearance, not for Dad's music, because my brother and I own it, but there's some Broadway songs in there. And the music clearance was only for film festivals. So now I have to go back to get clearance so that I can maybe get onto Netflix or HBO Latino, because I also have a Spanish subtitle version of the film.
Yeah, I was going to say, where can we see it? You know,
well,
I'm sure our friends would like to see it.
As soon as I clear the music, hopefully they'll see it. But that's going to be expensive. So hopefully that will work out, because I want to get the stories out there.
Yeah, we need to see that story. That sounds amazing. That sounds like an amazing story.
It is.
Wow, what a fun life you've had. Did you say that?
It's been fabulous, honestly. You know, as I say, even with the knocks and the butt, everybody has that, but it's been fantastic. I got to say. It has been really fantastic. And you don't realize, because you're in it, you're in the middle of it, you know, you're just doing it. But then when you reach a certain age and you look back, and then people start to want to talk to you and they want photos, and you're going, damn. I mean, it's surprising. And you have no idea. You had no idea what you were doing.
Yeah. Well, do you have any final advice for our friends, and any what is your next, I mean, before we get into the final advice, maybe what is your next phase? What are you working on?
I'm thinking of being an astronaut. No, I'm thinking, well, that's the only thing I haven't done.
Hey, my friend, you say you're 80, but you don't look 80. So I'm sure you have plenty of things that you're working on.
Well, a project I'm working on right now is like a dream project también, like the documentary on Dad was. You know, I wanted somebody forever to do it, and nobody was doing it. And one day Nancy Los Santos says, well, if we don't do it, it's not going to get done. And so we did it. So in the mid-1950s, my dad wrote a song, a Christmas song, Pancho Claus. And he wrote it.
Pancho Claus, I love it.
They still play it on the radio at Christmas. It's a beautiful children's song about Pancho Claus. And it happened because at East LA, they were going to have a big Christmas thing at the East LA Park, and the sheriff's department wanted my dad to play Santa. And he goes, oh yeah. You know, my dad was he was into the community. He'd do anything anybody asked him to do. So they put him in a Santa outfit and put him in a helicopter, and they land at East LA Park with hundreds of Mexicanos, you know, there. And my dad gets out, and there's a man, this is a true story. And there's a man right in front with his little boy in his arms. And he says, mijo, mijo, look, it's Santa. And the little kid goes, that's not Santa. That's a Chicano. Because he could see his brown face underneath this white beard, right? So dad goes home and he says, well, we need to have our own Santa. So he writes Pancho Claus. So forever, I wanted it to be a children's book. I wanted to be a children's book, a children's music book. But you know, I have my own career también, and I'm trying to do that on the side. And
yeah, you have too many things, but that's a wonderful story. I hope we get to see it.
The book is done. The book is published, and Bob Mackey, the designer, did the illustrations.
Oh.
But now, here's the pobre. He said, I told him the story. I said, I'm going to do a children's book one day. And he goes, oh, he's a good friend. He says, oh, I'll do the illustrations. I said, are you kidding me? And he did. And they're beautiful. It's on Amazon. But anyway, the next step was a movie. And so my friend Louisa Lashin, who's a wonderful TV writer, she got credits from here to there. She and I have written a live action film about Pancho Claus, the Christmas movie. And right now, our managers are pitching it, and there's a lot of interest, let's just say. So we're hoping it'll be on TV Christmas of 21, if we're lucky.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so for sure.
Because then those little brown kids can have their own brown Santa.
Hey, yeah, I
Do you know that
all
countries in the world have their own Santa or Saint Nicholas, and Mexico does not?
Yeah.
They have the Tres Reyes.
Yeah.
But there's no Mexican.
But Pancho Claus is actually pretty special. I love that.
It is.
I love that. Any final words, Dan, before I know our friend Abelardo, I see him right there.
Yeah, hell with him. He can wait. I will just say this one thing. You know, it's true. Follow your dream. Just follow your dream. But you got to be flexible because dreams can change. You know, I just want to be a performer. That's all. The other things never even came to mind. And yet I did them. I did them well. And I love them. And they enriched my whole life. And everything that I learned from this, I use there. And everything I use from there, I use there. It all works together. And by the time I got to Gatineau, as a writer, as a producer, as a performer, it all came together like that. So follow your dream. Don't give up. It's not easy. If it isn't that I'm going to drop dead if I can't do it, then don't do it. Really, because it's too hard. Don't say, oh, that looks like fun. You have to, like anything, not just performing, whatever you do, you have to have a passion for it. And you have to do that or do nothing. My mother said to my dad when they first started, he's a musician. You think that her family was happy that he was married a musician? And she said, I knew your dad had to have his music. And I told him, if we live under a bridge, as long as we're together with our kid, I was already born, that's fine. She didn't say, okay, you're married now, time to get a job. And she did not make him give up his dream. She knew he had to have his dream. And she supported him in his dream.
That's a story in itself. An amazing mother, an amazing woman.
It's always the woman. It's always the woman.
Yeah. You know, I can say the same thing about my mom.
Of course.
For sure. Powerful Mexican woman.
You can't beat them.
You can't beat them. Well, with that, we come to an end, and it's been a wonderful conversation. You know, as I knew it would be, because my friend, your story is beautiful, and you're an amazing individual, and we're so proud of you and so thankful that you took the time. Abelardo La Plaza, thank you for giving us the opportunity to continue to bring every month, you know, Mexican-American history makers to remind us who we really are and give us pride of who we are and change that distorted narrative that we just need to get rid of. It has to be, we have to get rid of it. And we are doing it every day, a little bit at a time. So Abelardo, thank you so much. Dan, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Michaela, thank you so much for your, you know, behind the scenes support. And friends, I bid you good night. I know Abelardo has a few final words, and my friend Abelardo.
Well, thank you so much, Jose Luis and Dan. And Dan, I think I'm just a little hurt that you didn't talk about your other project.
Which one?
Going out. Well, come on now.
Oh, you mean happy hour?
Every 2 weeks. What happens here at La Plaza, en Casa con La Plaza? Tell us about it.
That's right. I love my show. I do an hour like this, but I sit where you are, Jose Luis, and I interview some of our wonderful Latinos. And it's called Happy Hour because I do it with a martini. And my guest has mezcal, champagne, whatever. And I've interviewed Eddie Olmos, Vicky Carr, Gregory Nava, La Marisol. Next week, I'm doing Dolores Huerta. Then I have Lalo Alcaraz. And we're very proud of it because they tell their stories también. And they have stories too. And where are you going to hear it and who's going to celebrate them if we don't? So I'm very grateful to La Plaza. And we have a good time, right, Abelardo?
I think we do, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dan, and thank you so much, Dr. Ruiz. You could catch this show, if you came in late to the program, you could catch it on our YouTube channel at La Plaza LA, on our Facebook at La Plaza LA, and also on our website, lapca.org. Dr. Jose Luis Ruiz will be returning next month. I don't know who your guest is, but catch us next month. It's the third Tuesday of the month, 7 o'clock. It'll be a surprise, but it'll be a pleasant surprise. And as Dan said, his next guest is the one and only Dolores Huerta, coming up on
October 30. October
30. Well, thank you. Our next program here at En Casa con La Plaza tomorrow, it's Choosing Chicano Studies. The faculty and leadership of Cerritos College will be talking about their Chicano Studies program and why our students should learn more about their history through their program. And then on Friday, we have a collaboration with Pop-Up Magazine with a series of short documentaries, including one featuring our great friend, La Marisol. And then next Monday,
love her.
Yeah, La Marisol, she's one of a kind. We just had our gala. La Plaza de Cultura y Artes had our gala just this last Wednesday. It was a virtual online awards gala celebrating Los Lobos and Cástulo de la Rocha of Altamira. And you could catch it on our YouTube channel, the whole hour and 30 minutes, which included performances by La Marisol, Los Lobos, Jesus Martinez, and with shout outs by Dolores Huerta, Gloria Molina, and so much more. This is En Casa con La Plaza. Thank you so much. Everybody that joined us from Tucson, Murasaki.
Yay! Tucson.
From Las Vegas, Rosa Padilla. From Minnesota, Janet Moreno. And from all over the U.S., joining us tonight. Thank you once more. Muy buenas noches a todos. Y nos vemos.
Thank you. Thank you, Jose Luis.
Buenas noches.
Thank you, Abelardo. Thank you, Michaela.
Bye-bye.
Buenas noches.